It's okay.
All right. Well, let's welcome again to Fully Convinced. We're on lesson number 9. I'm looking forward to it. Let's open with a quick word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we just come to you acknowledging our sinful state apart from Christ and His grace, His righteousness imputed to us. And with boldness, we come to your throne knowing that all of His righteousness is ours and all of our sin has been deposited on Him for which He's been punished. And so this great exchange gives us a standing before you that we don't deserve. Father, there's two snares. One is the fear of man, which is a snare. There are two fears. One is the fear of man, which is a snare, and the other is the fear of you, which is the beginning of wisdom. And it's that we build this study on. Proverbs 1:7. Help us to equip each other and sharpen each other, as Gabe mentioned, so that we can be apologetes, faithful to your word, and rescue people from error. We ask all this in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
All righty. So let's pull up the catechism. This is lesson 9 was questions 108 through 114. So let me go share. And if Ryan or Andrew had joined, I was going to do, some intros and an overview of the catechism. But since they're not here, we'll just continue with regularly scheduled programming.
Hmm.
So, by way of review, last week we did lesson 8, which was the immorality of neutrality. We talked about neutrality, autonomy, common ground, self-deception, and then we finished with the preconditions of intelligibility, one of which was a fun exercise, which was this question up at the top here, question 107. What is presupposed to believe? I'll assume a bit that elephants are heavy. And the whole exercise of this was to look in the basement of our claims and see all the other things, preconditions that we need to believe in order to believe what it is we're claiming, right? So a precondition asks, what needs to be true in order for something else to be true? And it's very common for the natural man, your garden variety skeptic. They don't look at their assumptions, their preconditions, and so the whole thrust of Van Til and Bonson's presuppositional methodology is let's go look at those presuppositions. And then do they comport with reality? Do they contradict or cohere? And, we look at things in a worldview. So now on lesson 9, attacking faulty reasoning, we're going to look at question 108. And I'm going to read the headings of the 7 questions in the section, then open it up for questions so we can zoom in on any one of these. And then I built a helpful slide for one of the questions with regard to universals and particulars that we can kind of do a deep dive in. And then towards the end, if we have some time for practical application, I talked about some exchanges around solipsism. We could offer up that. I've got other examples too. So question 108, what is relativism and how is it refuted? And there's two kinds of relativism. There's ethical relativism, which concerns behavior, human conduct. How should you behave? And there's epistemological relativism about knowledge. Can anybody know anything for sure? Is knowledge available to us? Can we have a justified true belief? Question 109 is what is appetition and why is it a form of arbitrariness? Okay. Have you guys heard the word appetition before?
I don't have an appetite for that.
Very good. Okay, we'll get more into that. Number 110, how would you refute the claim that logic is in the brain? Logic doesn't exist outside of the mind, it's just in the brain. So that's a question that came up. Then the heavyweight question, because we've talked about the one and the many over and over in various ways. And so here's another instance of it under the title of universals. And there were 3 medieval attempts, medieval scholastic theologians that try to address universals and particulars. And so I've outlined those three positions in here, and then I've built a slide to take this lengthy and advanced response and put it into a single slide with a visual. So I'll pull that up and we'll go one by one over that. Then I brought up Immanuel Kant. Remember, I'm a lay person who is sympathetic to other lay people, and they go out into the world, and there's a marketplace of ideas. And you might be talking to a construction worker who's unsophisticated, doesn't know a stitch about philosophy, and then you may be engaged in a impromptu conversation with some liberal higher critic PhD who's going to challenge your Christian faith, right? And so the idea here is how would I, as a layperson who's trained in this method of two scholars, Dr. Van Til and Dr. Bahnsen, how do I use their material? How do I supplement that to teach myself to think in a biblical way, right? To think God's thoughts after him from wherever that challenge comes from. So Immanuel Kant uh, is a famous philosopher. He wrote this book, The Critique of Pure Reason, and you may have heard the terms phenomena, maybe not noumena, but he makes this distinction. So we can address that briefly. Question 113, how can a presuppositionalist respond to a biblical literary critic? So start thinking of things like the Jesus Seminar, um, a class known as German Higher Criticism, which challenges the historicity and the inerrancy of Scripture, the authorship of it, things like that. So, how would you use a presuppositional method to respond to them? In fact, many of them are claiming to be Christians. That presents a unique challenge. And the last one, question 114, how can Plato's work show hypocrisy in biblical textual criticism? Okay. So that's this week, lesson 9. Let me just kick it back to both of you. I'll get to question 108. And were there any questions here on relativism?
I know I always have questions,
Oh,
but
pardon me, Gabe. Brian's wants to come on in. So I'm going to
yeah,
admit.
let him in. Open the door.
Yeah, there
Let
we
him
go.
in.
There we go. Yeah, well, let's take a break and we'll introduce everybody. Brian, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you. Is your camera?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can
Yep.
hear you. Can you hear me?
Uh, yeah, I can hear you.
All right. Are you able to come on camera and meet the guys?
Uh, yeah, I will. I'm driving home right now.
Oh, okay. Then stay audio. We want you to be safe.
Yeah.
So you're not, you don't want to be looking at your phone and trying to follow this. So um, we'll let you just participate as a listener. We're going through lesson 9, and basic format is sometimes what we'll do is we'll review, go way back into the first weeks and just kind of do a brief review, kind of to reinforce through repetition, right? That's what catechisms are. And then we'll go back over in a little more detail the previous week sometimes. So we just did lesson number 8. We talked about concepts like neutrality, autonomy, common ground, self-deception, the preconditions of intelligibility, why is
Nice.
neutrality immoral? Okay, and this week we are on lesson 9, and we're dealing with relativism. How would we refute that?
Nice.
What is appetition? How is it arbitrary? And so right now, what I've done is review the questions, and then on the line with me, there you are, uh, Gabe and Hamilton. This is Ryan. You guys met via text. Ryan goes to Providence Church with me in Pensacola. He just moved from Sacramento um, over to Florida. And Hamilton and Gabe, Ryan Hamilton is in seminary. He lives up in Brockton, Mass. He's
Nice.
originally from a little archipelago called Cabo Verde, west of Africa. And Gabe is an elder at the Ontario URC in Ontario, California. He and I are longtime friends. When I lived in Southern California, we attended church together. So,
Nice. Nice
yeah.
to meet you guys.
Nice to meet you, man.
Nice to meet
Yeah.
you. Nice to meet
Nice
you,
to meet you
Ryan.
guys. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, and Ryan, Gabe, and Hamilton, you've seen Jeff Durbin, who uses Bonson's method quite adroitly. Um, Ryan went to church with Jeff Durbin, so he's definitely familiar with.
Yeah, it was a Paul it was James White's I was a Frank Turek man because I came out of rehab. So when I was super into evangelism, it was Frank Turek's method. It was Frank Turek's method that
Mm.
got me, interested. Yeah, but then it was James White's debate versus David Silverman uh that totally flipped the script for me. So
That's great.
so
Yeah.
so it was really presuppositionalism that made me reformed. And
Mm.
then and it was James White who said, your theology will determine your apologetics. So yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great. Well, thanks for the brief background there.
Yeah.
So let's talk about relativism. Hamilton,
Mhm.
how would do you have any questions about it, or you want me to kind of be a mock skeptic and pose a challenge
That
to you? We can just start reviewing.
that
So
sounds good.
okay, there's two kinds of relativism. Okay, there's ethical relativism, which is how you should behave. So, is it wrong to murder? Is it wrong to lie? Is there an ethical obligation to be honest? A skeptic's going to say ethics are all relative. That means, there's nothing objective, global in scope, invariant in character, right? Um, and so there's one way we're going to answer ethical relativism. The other version is epistemological. So let's read some of this because I think the answers are pretty good. I really like I use the examples at the very end. So we'll spend some time at the very last paragraph or two. So first of all, it's a form of arbitrariness, right? We remember what arbitrary is. Arbitrary comes from an arbitrator. An arbitrator in Latin, arbitus is somebody who's a judge. Okay. So when someone makes a claim and they don't give a justification for their claim, be it ethical or epistemological, then they're basically the author of the claim. And the reason the word author is important is because that makes them the authority, because they're not referring to something else. They're just stating it. And that makes them arbitrary as an authority. Gabe, why would they be considered arbitrary if they just announce it on their own say so?
Yeah, well, for the reason that you just stated, right? They are setting themselves up as the authority, and
Hmm.
they're just saying it. They're making their claim on their own say so. So in many ways, or basically, the best illustration of somebody being arbitrary is none other than the Lord Jesus Christ, right? He would say things like, "Well, you have heard it said by." Those in the past,
Yep.
but now I say. So obviously, it's not a sin when he does it because he's God.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Matthew 7, right? You've heard it said of old, in other words, when he was saying about building your home on the rock versus the sand. And then he went on to say that you've heard it said of old, you should not commit adultery. But I say, if you look upon a woman with lust, you've committed adultery. And so the rabbinic method of teaching was Rabbi so and so taught and Rabbi so and so before him. And then the crowd who was listening to his teaching, when he concluded in Matthew 7, they said, he doesn't teach like the scribes and the Pharisees. He teaches like he's got authority. Okay.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah, the self-attesting Christ does make those absolute claims many times, up to 92 times in the New Testament, confirming his claims with the words, it is written or it stands written. Um, but the person on the street, the guy at Starbucks, when he makes that claim and he doesn't authorize it with evidence, he doesn't appeal to anything, then his claim is arbitrary. And the reason is because on his worldview, he arose from nature and you arose from nature. You've got one natural, source against another natural source. There's nothing that breaks the tie. Okay. You need something supernature above that can have authority, something you would appeal to. So when, as I write in the second sentence, it is represented in the common phrase, that may be true for you, but it's not true for me. That's the classic relativism summary of epistemological relativism. And two ways to refute relativism. Number one, reverse or contradict their assertion. When a relativist makes a subjective assertion, just simply reverse it. And if they say, hey, what's your evidence for that? And I go, you didn't need evidence for your assertion, so I don't need evidence to deny it. You handed me the weapon to defeat you, right? If you get to be arbitrary, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, then I get to be arbitrary.
Right.
So you say, you affirm, and I go, no, it's not. You go, what's your proof? I don't need proof. You didn't need proof. Nobody put you in charge. It's that simple as that. So what you're always looking for is authority. Okay. Continuing. Number two, I use this technique all the time. It's the Latin reductio, reduce, ad to absurdum, absurdity. You reduce your opponent's position to absurdity. You're showing them the absurd consequences of their belief. You do so by exposing that they are holding to something they really don't hold to. And Jesus did this when he talked about a house divided against itself. You cast out demons because you're Beelzebub. If I did that, that would be a house divided against itself. See, he's reducing their criticism to absurdity. Let's pause there. Any comments, questions? Turn off my mirror.
Can we think of another example where another biblical example of that?
I could research that.
If not now, at the moment, maybe we can make it a little homework assignment, I guess. But
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, Abraham was willing to sacrifice his son, and some people have said, if God told you to kill, I think it was who said this, was Alex O'Connor, or maybe one of the skeptics asked a Christian. He said, if God commanded you to kill me, would you?
Mhm.
Have you ever heard that?
Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah, my response would be, I hope so.
Mhm.
No, I hope I'd obey God. But then the question would be, how would I know it was God? Right? And what would be the purpose? That challenge, and what they're doing is they're taking pot shots at the account of Abraham being willing to sacrifice Isaac, right? But you know what Hebrews says? Abraham knew that God could just raise him back from the dead. So,
That's right.
right? He's going to raise him to life. So I'm going to be obedient because God will just give him back to
Yeah,
me
and
again.
I think in Hebrews 2, where Paul, I guess he's asking like a rhetorical question about like, did you, I think it was dealing with circumcision, where he was asking if if you received, if Abraham received the promise, uh, did that come before that came before circumcision, not after? And I think Paul was trying to show the foolishness of believing in that somehow our works. He was refuting how faith is not the result of works, but
Mhm.
yeah, or election is not. I don't know. It's fuzzy in my brain right now. I'll think of it at some point. But there are other examples of reductio
Yeah, I can think of one.
absurdum.
In Romans 3, when Paul is saying, should we
Continue
be
in
that good
sin,
may come? Should we lie in order to tell the truth?
right?
Right.
Okay.
And of course, the
So
answer is no.
there's ethical relativism, which is how you behave. But then there's this epistemological relativism. That's about knowledge claims. So against epistemological relativism, where it's claimed no knowledge is possible. So that's a relativist. There's no knowledge possible. Or if there is knowledge, no one can know it for sure. Now, you know these red flags, they should come up whenever you hear no and then something. No is a negation.
It's an
When they
absolute
make
statement.
a universal negation, you know right away what would you have to possess in order to
All
negate?
knowledge.
Yeah, you've got to be omniscient. So
Right.
ironically, when people deny Christ being omniscient, they're actually claiming that they are omniscient. And you can point
Right.
that, right? How could you know what only God could know? It's
Or
exactly what
even, how could you know what Christ knew?
exactly.
You only know what you know, and sometimes not even that.
Exactly.
Right.
Okay. So, and then here's a great reductio. So they go, no knowledge is possible, or if there is knowledge, nobody can know it for sure. Expose the inconsistency by asking, quote, are you absolutely sure about
Sure
that?
about that. Right.
There's an internal.
No one can know anything. No one can know, as the atheist would say, no one can know anything for certain. And I would
Mhm.
always ask them, except for that statement you just made, that we can't know anything for certain.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anytime a monist, when you deny the creator creature distinction, you're denying God, you're denying omniscience, then you're going to be refuted by your own words because it's going to require you to be omniscient, which, I'll go, wow, you know everything? What's my mom's middle name? I don't know. I
Right.
guess you, right? Yeah. So now the fun examples. Um, the same criticism can be applied to ethical relativism. So we've got that. Uh, here's a couple good examples. An atheist student writes a paper on relativism. His Christian professor tells him, this is excellent, and he gives him an F for a grade. The student objects. I put a lot of work into that. You admitted it was excellent. Why give me an F? The professor responds, you persuaded me about relativism, so I figured it didn't
Right.
matter what grade you received. Or you reverse it. A Christian student says to his atheist professor after the professor's lectures on relativism, hey, professor, since all is relative, can you do me a favor and change my C grade into an A? And
Right.
this is in our checklist. So, Ryan, I don't know if you familiarize yourself with it, but in our table of contents at the back, let me go to, oh, sorry, try that. There. And let me just go back to my table of contents. So I want to show you the checklist real quick. It's right here, the presuppositional checklist. So remember, these are the things we're looking at when we debate or when we engage in dialogue and comparing worldviews. We're looking for arbitrary. According to Greg, 85% of all your responses are going to be, yeah, it's just arbitrary. And that takes several forms. It could be just someone's opinion. It could be some relativist statement. It could be some ignorant conjecture. Oh, the Bible's not accurate. Some medieval monk tampered with the text, to which we go, which medieval monk? When did he do it? What's your evidence? Oh, I don't have any evidence of it. Well, then it's just ignorant conjecture. A conjecture is a guess, and ignorant because it's not based on evidence, right?
Yeah, I had my cousin Joe use that one on me.
Yeah. They just throw
He
those
started
out.
to attack. He started to attack the New Testament and just the Bible in general, saying that the Bible, was a book that had been copied and recopied, handed down generation to generation. And isn't it? I mean, it's only logical that things were going to get messed up.
Hmm.
And he had no evidence for that. He was just saying because conceivably that happens to other writings, why wouldn't it happen to this one?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so anyways, there's the checklist in the back. We're looking for these three things. Is it arbitrary? Is it inconsistent? And then if it's not, does it justify the preconditions of intelligibility? Okay, so that's the checklist. All right, so let's go back to where we were. And we go Command Option 2, and I'll just do it this way. We're right about in here. And a little more. Last one. Okay. So one more. So we've talked about relativism. Appetition. Hamilton, had you heard of the term appetition?
No, sir.
Yeah, it's kind of an arcane English word. Um, it means your appetite. Um,
Mhm.
Plato saw human anthropology as three main things. You can remember them by the acronym RAT: reason, appetite, temperament. So the reason is, of course, your intellectual tool. Your temperament is your emotional disposition, introvert, extrovert, expressive, right? Um, the four Greek humors. And then the appetite was your affections, your desires, your drives. Okay. In fact, you can, I forget where in Plato's works, but he has he thought that society should be ruled by the philosophers. Philosophers had the primacy of the intellect. And so, reason for them, he had the image of a charioteer. So, you got a horse chariot, it's got two horses, and then a man standing in the chariot. He's the charioteer. And the question is, who should be the charioteer? A person driven by their appetite, a person driven by their temperament, or a person driven by reason? And since Plato, the philosopher, reason, the intellect, should be the charioteer, pulled by the horses of appetite and temperament. And then he went on to say that those who were governed by appetition were the merchants. And those who were governed by their temperament, particularly a stoic one, they were the soldiers. They were dutiful. They did what they were told. And it was the intellectuals who should run the show. So that's a helpful image. So appetition now, apologetically, we're talking about things that you like or dislike. So if you listen to the debate between Dr. Bonson and Mr. Tabash, the ACLU attorney, Tabash over and over again was engaging in appetition as a form of arbitrariness, and Greg called it out. Mr. Tabash said that he would really make offensive caricatures of Jehovah, and then he would just claim that hell was a moral obscenity. Okay. And Greg's response to that was all Mr. DeBosch has demonstrated is that he doesn't like the Christian God. Just because I don't like broccoli doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So what he was pointing out is all this guy's doing is giving me his autobiography. I don't care about your autobiography. This is supposed to be a reasoned debate.
Not he was giving his personal preferences, right?
Exactly.
He was, and so it's like Tabash and my cousin Joe went to the same. They learned from the same guy because my cousin also made that claim to me several times. He didn't like hell, judgment. The problem is not so much that they don't believe in God, or any of that. The problem is that they don't believe, or they don't prefer, they don't want the Christian God. That's really what it comes down to, is the kind of God that they don't like, the kind of God that God really is.
Exactly. 100%. Enmity makes you an enemy. Mm-hmm. They have enmity inflicted by God, Genesis 3:15 and on.
And so I like the term for that, hostility.
That's right. So a nice maneuver, if you haven't heard it, it's great when you listen to it on the recording, is then Greg did a reductio. He showed an inconsistency in Tabash's position, because Tabash had said you only know through observation. What do we call that? When you only know through observation? What school of
empiricism?
Correct. So Tabash is a hardcore empiricist, wants the Bible to be put and God's existence to be put to the scientific test. To which Bonson said, he says, Dr. Bonson reduced his position to absurdity, showing that Mr. Tabash couldn't know. Okay, let's back it up. Additionally, because Tabash committed to an empirical epistemology, you only know through observation, Bonson reduced that position to absurdity, showing that Tabash couldn't know hell was a moral monstrosity because he never observed it. And then this is what Greg said. It's clear my opponent hasn't thought through his worldview, because when he begins talking about it, he just wanders into self-contradiction. And it was like a real zinger, because you're an hour into the debate and Tobosh is over and over demanding evidence. And then Greg goes, where's the evidence that hell is a moral obscenity? Right. So it had a real emotional punch to it. All right. Just a few more to go. Have you ever heard this? Like somebody just says, yeah, logic's in the brain because, we believe in the laws of logic that are universal, invariant. They're not relative to a culture, right? And somebody comes up and says, I had a Christian who had a secular philosophy professor at Mount San Antonio College. He says, yeah, logic's just in the brain. So you'd have to ask this. Logic can't be located in the brain because it has a universal character. It's not person relative. Okay. Saying
Yeah,
logic
and
is
the reason why that's so foolish is because the people that you're talking about that are talking,
Mhm.
they don't believe in the mind. They only believe in the physical matter, the gray matter in your cranium, the head, the brain, the physical
Yeah.
organ. And
So this
so,
is
yeah, and
this
so,
is this is important for universals and particulars because
yeah.
I'm going to pull the slide up and I
Mhm.
think it's going to be helpful to you. But when they say logic is in the brain, the is the definitive article.
Mhm.
That means there's one.
There's only one.
But they're denying that when they say logic, there's only one logic. They're just saying there's logics in the brains. Well, it can't be the same logic because you and I don't have the same brain, right?
Mhm.
And logic pre-existed the brain, and it's going to exist after someone's brain turns to dust. It's like you don't create new logic, right? If
Yeah,
logic was
it's
in the
not like
brain, it would cease to exist when the brain does.
yeah, it's not like the law of non-contradiction will therefore be okay to contradict at the moment your brain stops working and
Right.
you go to be judged.
Yeah. And then nobody lives consistently with that. If they do want to make that claim that they're relativists, you could just say, well, then that means that your wallet is simultaneously yours and mine. So I'm going to take my wallet. And you grab their wallet and they're going to resist. Like it's there.
Right.
Oh, I
As
thought.
if as if the law of non-contradiction, is a valid thing.
Yeah. So simple one. It's in the brain. The brain is a universal. They're denying that. And now we get into the heavy one, the universals and particulars. Now we've talked about universals and particulars. Lex, before we go into this, can somebody define what a universal is?
A universal is an example of a universal is any abstract entity, such as the laws of logic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're talking about um, classes of things. And when we point to a thing, we're giving it a name and we're signifying that it's part of a class. So this is categorical predication. I'm predicating something belongs in a class based on its properties, right? That fishtail on that female with a fishtail, that's a mermaid, right? So I'm classifying things. So
Or like
then,
a chair, right?
uh-huh,
Going to a chair in well, we're in Pensacola, Florida. That's a chair. And then you go to China and you're in China and you're like, that's a chair.
correct.
But the
Right.
So,
chairs, but the chairs are very different from each other.
You're right.
well, we talked about that. If you
Yeah,
look in the
that's a good
catechism,
point. That's a good point.
yeah,
And then if
exactly.
you can say it in Chinese, but you
So
can say
I
it in
think
Chinese and they'll know it's a chair.
I think I think maybe what we're getting at is the fact that, like, let's just stick to the catechism when we think of ducks, right?
That's what
Mhm.
I'm going to bring up, Gabe. So that's my slide. So did you
I
guys
made it
read?
back home, by the way, and I got the book in front of me, you guys. So,
Okay, yeah, we're on question 111, Ryan.
yeah,
So
right.
it's what are three medieval attempts to explain universals? Were you able to read this one, Hamilton? This one's kind of heavy duty.
Oh,
Um,
I didn't read it.
okay, I'm going to bring up a slide now. There's three classes in here because I don't want to read this whole thing to you. But you have realists, nominalists, conceptualists. And what we're trying to do is justify the existence of a universal. Okay. And so here, let's bring this up. I'm going to stop share, reshare. Let me go share. Okay, share. Let me just go full screen on that and Command 2. There we are. All right. You guys seeing my universals and particulars?
Hmm.
Okay. So you can study philosophy 3 millennia back. You're going to encounter this
Hmm. Yeah.
recurring challenge of how do we recognize this one and many of things?
Yeah.
In the catechism, I had a nice table for you guys. I'll look up the question, but talked about transcendence and immanence and empiricism and rationalism and summarize all these things. So this is my attempt today. I put this together. Greg used the example of three ducks. So the particulars are the ducks, right? So I've got, by the way, these are Daffy Duck's nephews from 1937, Huey, Dewey, and Louie. Okay. So we got these three ducks. They are not the same duck. They are particular ducks, but they have the same form. Hence, they get the label duck, but they have different names. By the way, a helpful way for me and for you, it's not 100% accurate, but to remember a universal versus a particular is to just think grammatically, and I think I covered this earlier in the
Many.
catechism, of a common noun versus a proper noun. So Adam, Gabe, Ryan, Hamilton are men in the category of manhood. Okay, so we're individual men. We have the same form, but we exist in different space, but we all belong to the same category of male. So a proper noun is your name, Gabe Martinez, and the common noun is, adult male. So that's what we have here. We got these three particulars, and the universal that they belong to is the duckness. So the first thing is just when you're in dialogue with somebody and you've asked some questions about their worldview, you might want to bring this up and say, where is duckness located? Where is that? And this is kind of like that previous question we dealt with. Where is logic? Oh, it's just in the brain. Okay. Well, that's going to be a nominalist perspective. So there's three medieval perspectives that try to answer this. Where is this duckness? Does it exist? Is it real? So that's why the question, where is it? So
Right.
the three positions are realism, nominalism, and conceptualism. And we're studying this. Why? Because we want to know a basic primer of philosophy so that we can talk to people who understand philosophy, who study philosophy. Maybe they're advanced philosophers, and we might be able to learn from them. But you have enough here to know, here's these super smart medieval, scholastics who are basically Aristotelian, and they're wrestling with something. So if you understand it at a basic level, and you know that this one and many is a abiding problem throughout all of philosophic history, then you can be, I call it the Socrates method. When I encounter somebody who is throwing stuff out that I don't understand, and it's kind of like an intellectual bullying experience. They're just talking faster, using terms I don't know, demonstrating some knowledge in an area I'm weak. Then I shift into Socrates mode. Remember, Socrates is the gadfly of Athens. And when he meets Euthyphro, who came to Athens to take his dad on trial, um, and Socrates is asking Euthyphro, "Oh, so wait, you must know where virtue and good comes from. Does it come from the gods?" And so he starts to ask him like he's ignorant. And before long, Euthyphro is wrapped up like a pretzel with just Socrates' questions. So I use this stuff here. In fact, I remember Greg saying on one of his lectures, like when he would talk to, say, a teacher's assistant in philosophy, and he'd ask him, "So where is this duckness located?" And they've never been challenged with it. And this TA said, I've actually never thought of that. Right? So they go through a course on philosophy and they don't actually think about this stuff. Many times that gets, avoided. So the duckness, according to the realist, is it real? What's their belief? Yes, universals are real and they exist outside of the mind. Remember Plato, the forms, right? The realm of
Yeah.
ideas, the forms, right?
An
So
external world where
Yep.
these
And
things
we're down
exist.
here recollecting what we knew up there. When I see a chair, that's because I knew perfect chairness up there. When I see a duck, duckness was up there. So Anselm, in the medieval period, is a famous realist, and it's defending universals that they're real and they exist outside of the mind. Okay. Then come along the nominalists, Latin nomen, name. So this is nameism. Universals don't exist outside the mind. They're just names for particulars. So I see a Huey and I go duck, and I see a Dewey and I go duck. Okay. And Roscellinus and William of Ockham, they were nominalists. I noticed that Occam also gets referred to as a conceptualist. Now, conceptualism is a very subtle change. Uh, conceptualists take this mediated position because they're going to say that the universals are real, but they're not separate from the object. In other words, they're derived from the object, and your mind abstracts. That's what you do when you abstract something. You look at something and you abstract its form from it. So you see that shape of Dewey, and it resembles Louis and Huey, and you abstract duckness. Now, the duckness of, like for Aristotle, the form was inside the duck, and he pulled it out. And for the conceptualists, it's very similar to that, I think. They're looking at the shape, the form, and they're saying that's the same thing, the duckness. The problem with that, let's look at the problems. So let's deal with the nominalists. Do you see a problem with the nominalist position? Saying that they're
Not,
just names?
yeah, they don't exist outside the mind. They're just names given for the particulars.
So the reason I wrote the word right here, Gabe, duck,
Mhm.
duck, duck, is you could do this with a nominalist. Most of your atheists are going to be nominalists because they deny the supernatural, they deny the immaterial. So it makes sense. They'd be anomalous. That's why they're also empiricists. They don't believe in a separate realm in epistemologically. They deal with the five, right? The many. So I write three words duck there, and I'd ask this question. Is there one word duck there, or is there three words duck there?
Mhm.
And you've just reintroduced the one and the many.
Because if I say there's only one word duck written
Then,
there,
then how do you apply that one word to three objects? How is
and then
that
if you
three?
say it's three words,
And they're all the same. It looks like the same word to me, right? So what
right.
happens is a nominalist secretly becomes a realist again. He basically just reintroduces the problem of the one and the many. It's a way, it's what atheists do. They go, no, it's just a name. But you have to justify how you know it's just a name. And
Mhm.
by the way, that name looks a lot like the same, that particular label looks like the same label on all three ducks. The conceptualist is saying, he's extracting from these and saying they're all duck, and they're basically reintroducing what the nominalists are doing. Okay. And so it's helpful to draw it out and then ask, is there one or is there three? Another thing that I like to do, and I think I've done this with you, Gabe and Hamilton, and Ryan, if you've listened to Greg, this is one of his famous reductios. Using the same universals and particulars is about numbers, and he'll tell somebody, you realize you've never seen a number, and then they're going to think that sounds like lunacy. You know, I see numbers all the time. You go, no, you've never seen a number. You've only seen numerals or
Or
instantiation.
instances of it.
Yes. And so then when you draw the number one in English or in Arabic, the way we use it, and then you draw the number, or we use the number two. So we draw an Arabic two, and they have a Roman numeral two. And we say, what are those? And they go, that's the number two. And they're a materialist. Then you'd say, well, it doesn't look like the number two. That one sure doesn't look like that one. How can they both be the same? That's because they're both pointing to the same thing, two-ness, right? And then you'd ask, the two-ness is the universal. Well, where's that located? And we're right back into this question. So,
It's just a sign pointing to an other reality.
yeah. And
When
then as a
I think of
Christian,
the Lord's Supper, when I think
mhm,
of the sacraments, right? These
mhm,
are signs and seals, pointing to a greater reality.
Mm-hmm. Agree. Any questions about this? I wrote down the biblical. The universal exists originally in God's mind and are revealed to the mind of the creature. Augustine had this concept of divine ideas, Van Til. That's why Van Til says every fact is a created fact. God made the object, the duck.
Yeah.
He has the category of duckness because he created ducks from his pattern. So the form is in God's mind. He's omniscient. He made me in his image. He gave me perception technology, a mind, will, emotions, or reason, appetite, and temperament. I made in his image. And he can reveal to me that duck. He controls the process of that duck staying alive, my eyeballs for seeing the images hit my cornea, my brain to remember what he instructed me what a duck was in general revelation. He's in charge of that whole transaction. That duck isn't just out there on its own. And I'm just sitting here because God's a deist and he just threw some stuff into the cake mix and then let it go and then backed off. No, he's controlling the process of us learning. He's controlling this meeting right now. Everything, right? Hairs of your head and the sparrows can't fall without his will.
You know, the problem with just unbelief in general, and even our evidentialist brothers in particular, is that their God is just too small.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, if a God threatened with eternal conscious torment, I think 90% of the internet is objecting to the existence of hell and that sin is really bad and that God's real holy. All right, I'm going to reshare the catechism. Was that helpful?
Yeah,
I was trying to think of a way to put it together. I'm still working on it.
yeah, I think so. What do you think, Hamilton?
That was very good. I loved it. Very clear, very well put together, organized. I think you did a great job.
Thank you. All right, well, I'm glad it's helpful. All right, we're almost done here. So we just did which one? 111, the three medieval attempts to explain universals. Okay, so now 112. Immanuel Kant is a very sophisticated philosopher from Prussia. He came right after David Hume. David Hume destroyed confidence in Western civilization's ability to know. He was a real champion of skepticism and brutally consistent. I've been studying ancient, medieval, and Renaissance Enlightenment philosophers. It's a great course from Gray.
I don't,
And I have
you
quotes.
know,
I'm sorry.
you know something I learned doing some apologetic studying.
What's that?
Schleiermacher,
Yeah,
him,
Friedrich Schleiermacher.
Lud-
yes,
Ludwig.
Yeah, man. We're gonna get to those guys, the German higher critics. They're up next. So
Is it Ludwig?
Friedrich
Friedrich Schleiermacher, right?
Schleiermacher. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah. So Immanuel Kant was uh, a really interesting intellect. His book, Critique of Pure Reasons, it's advanced reading. He's well known for this distinction between phenomena and noumena. This phrase, the Ding an sich, is the German phrase, a thing in itself. So when people tell you the perception's reality, that's really coming from Immanuel Kant's philosophy because he said there's the objects that you experience, objects of knowledge, only the phenomena as you perceive them, but you don't perceive them in the
As
new
they are.
as they really are. Okay. And Dr. Van Til does quite a bit of good work on Immanuel Kant. He's got a couple lectures you can listen to. It's very advanced. Kant said that David Hume awakened him from his dogmatic slumber, and he had to come up with an answer to Hume's skeptical challenge. Hume had said, no one observes causation. It's fun to study this guy, Hume. And it's not depressing because, you've got Greg Bahnsen right there. And he's going to give the answer. But before he gives you the answer, he just puts you under the hot showers of Hume's skepticism. You're like, oh, I don't know what are my answers to this? It's kind of fun to go through. But Hume argued that people observe succession of events, but they don't observe a necessary succession. They don't observe causation. And he went after substance and everything else that, Rene Descartes and others had established before him. And he's just taken a flamethrower to the history of Western philosophy, just scorching the earth, saying no one knows anything. And then yet he'd get real depressed because he couldn't justify his existence as a self.
So he'd go play backgammon with his friends.
Yeah, I have the quote from him at the back when we get to the atheist. So you can go there and read that.
Yeah.
So he's an interesting character. But so if you hear the phenomena, noumena, this is coming from Immanuel Kant. He is famous for his categorical imperative moral argument for God's existence. And in response to Hume, he wanted to save science and a basis for faith.
And make room for faith.
Yeah. Okay.
So noumena, when we think of it, just to boil it down in a real rudimentary way, has to do with the thought, the immaterial, the mind, and then phenomenon is the material world, right? The things we see and observe.
Yeah. The thing about Kant is your mind, Van Til uses the ice cube tray and the divider that creates the perfect ice cubes inside the tray. He said that's like your mind imposing the form on the matter. And
On the
so
water.
the mind is active. That's Hume's, or that's Kant's whole thing, is that the mind is not passive, just like a photo lens with data coming in, but the mind is working on what it's observing.
Can I ask you a question, Adam?
Yeah.
With all these philosophers, because of common grace, do you see them as having some sense of truth, not completely, but
Yes.
getting at some facts?
Absolutely, Hamilton. So remember, we asked the question earlier: do unbelievers have justified true belief, knowledge? Do they have knowledge? From a biblical standpoint, our answer was no. They have unjustified truths that they believe. So they believe truths, but they're unjustified truths. They believe truth.
Right.
Remember, justified true belief. Christians
At best, they're inconsistent, right?
exactly. But that God is gracious. The rain falls on the just and the unjust.
Because even the surgeon that did
Absolutely.
all of the open heart surgeries on Greg was not a Christian.
Yeah.
So can we say that he gets at the truth, that he gets it right sometimes? I sure hope so before they gave him that license, right?
Yeah, when they say two and two is four and we say two and two is four, how could an unbeliever not have truth, but a believer has the truth? No, that's why we say he has an unjustified truth. Because then he's going to go say there's no such thing as a material and immaterial.
Well, yeah, before
There's
you
just
go
matter.
that far, he can't, if we both agree on the math question, right? That two and two is four, they agree two and two is four.
Yeah.
Problem is that they can't give an ultimate accounting for why two and two is four.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Right.
It's
That's what it boils
unjustified.
down
Now,
to.
so they agree with us
Yeah.
on that and on many other things,
That's
but
exactly
they
right.
can't give an ultimate accounting for it. And one of the great questions that we went through was the uniformity of nature, the inductive principle,
Yeah,
right?
it's working.
They know that the sun has been rising and setting for thousands of years. We all believe it, but we can give an account for it.
Yeah, it's a justification.
But in their worldview, in their God-denying worldview, in their Christian theistic denying worldview, they cannot give an ultimate accounting for it. They have to admit that if they were to be consistent with their worldview,
That's right.
that there is no reason why that sun should rise tomorrow.
You're exactly right. Or you
Mhm.
couldn't know it for sure. And this is what we're trying to do is internal critiques, worldview comparisons to point out the inconsistency. When they say two and two is four, metaphysically that's true. When I say two and two is four, that is true metaphysically. Epistemologically, we don't share the same principle of interpretation. So we share the common ground metaphysically. We don't share the common ground of how we affirm that to be true. Because in
They
So
they
regard
they
to
are in essence equal opportunity borrowers. They
yeah,
borrow our shit to throw it back at us, to
exactly.
fight
right.
us.
I have a question based off what you guys said with the unbelievers. So, be, like you guys were bringing up the unbelieving doctor who did Greg's surgeries and stuff, right? Um,
Yeah.
so no one would say that like the atheist isn't logical, right? Um, would that fall under the thinking God's thoughts after him as far as the atheist, or no?
In part, atheists live on borrowed capital. They don't give credit to the source.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
God reveals to them one of the questions in the catechism. Here, we'll do a quick search. Um, does God teach all knowledge? So, does God reveal all knowledge? Right there. So you click on question 123, we zoom. Um, so we learn Christians have a revelational epistemology, but one might ask, does God reveal knowledge to non-Christians? The biblical answer is yes. Psalm 94:10. He who disciplines the nations does he not rebuke? He who teaches man knowledge. For with
Yeah.
you is the fountain
Okay.
of life. In your light do we see light. God reveals all knowledge, even down to the mundane details like farming. I recommend if you want to meditate on Isaiah 28, verses 24 through 29, it goes through all this archaic agricultural methods of farming. It ends by saying, the farmer, he threshes and he, puts barley in his place, embers the border, all this stuff, knows what to do with the cumin, uses horses with a cartwheel. So he's going through all this detailed process. And then verse 29, this also comes from the Lord of hosts. He is wonderful in counsel and excellent in wisdom. And then I put, lastly, the church father Augustine famously wrote, there is no teacher who teaches man knowledge except for God, which came from
Mm.
his work,
Amen.
Magistral. So again, many Christians, I'm sad to say, and I think as Gabe said, it would just make God too big. Uh, they treat God and they become closet deists, where God's the divine watchmaker who just creates everything and then lets it go. But from the Reformed perspective, God has an active involvement in his creation. He's governing it and driving it according to his plan of foreordination, his predetermined counsel. He's driving everything towards a history
Well,
conclusion.
Paul on Mars Hill, Adam, what did what was his concluding remarks to those knuckleheads?
Yeah,
What did he say? In him,
we live, move,
move,
have our being.
and have our being.
Yeah,
Think about what that means.
exactly. Yeah, God, as one would say, is the background of our existence. Okay, so I think that's a great thing. So whenever you read Van Til, and Van Til says all facts are created facts, that really messed with me for a while. I'm like, what does he mean? Like, I would never think of a fact as being created. I'd
Because
see,
we didn't have a philosophy of fact. I know I didn't.
yeah. So I'd think of me being created. I'd think of the duck being created. But how is the fact of me seeing a duck, of being a duck, how was that created? Like this whole process. Well, that's because God controls the revelation. Okay. Um, this is good. So we're getting there. Let's go to the previous page. Okay, so then we get to the last one. I follow there's a lot of these higher critics. Eamon, you're in seminary, Hamilton.
No, he checked out, Adam.
Oh, he had to leave at 8. That's right.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so this one's about biblical literary critics. Do you guys have much experience with these guys? Reading their
Yeah, I've heard of the
materials?
Jesus Seminar, of course.
Mm-hmm. Yep, Bart Ehrman, right? Moody Bible Institute, the famous Christian atheist, right? You'd be one
Yeah,
of
that's
those.
why I wasn't really excited about it when it was brought up a couple of months ago. And I just I don't know why I remembered his name, but I couldn't put it back. I
Mhm.
couldn't connect that he was in the Jesus seminar.
Yeah. Um, so these guys are a particular challenge, especially for a new apology, because what they're going to do is reach right into that new Christian's worldview and rip the guts out of it
Mm-hmm.
by telling them that they don't know how to read the Bible. They need the PhD critic to tell them what it means because they're going to use lots of intellectual bullying, alleged scholarship, but they've got these hostile presuppositions. They're anti-supernatural, reject miracle, and you'll see many instances. I find them to be a particular challenge because they're smarter than you about the Bible. They know the original languages, they know textual criticism. Uh, they're going to easily bully you. So, to which this is why you've got to have the method down and go into Socrates mode and go, man, you sound smart about the Bible. I can't wait to learn how you know what you know. And you can say, if you're willing to work with me and speak on my level, I'd like to hear. And then you're just going to listen closely for those inerrant, false assumptions. You go, wait, how do you know that? Where did you learn that? Did you observe that? And you've got to attack them that way. Um, they bring hostile presuppositions. They're autonomous. They refuse to submit to God's self-attesting revelation, but instead believe God must prove himself to me. Second, they have an anti-supernatural bias. Miracles are impossible. Third, they reject God's providential involvement in the world. And by the way, you'll see many critics commenting on the book of Isaiah will posit that there were two Isaiahs. Now, why do you think they do that? Isaiah 1 through 40, and then there's a second writer from chapter 41 on. They'll say that. You know why? Because Isaiah, the prophet, predicted the liberation of Israel, and he named their liberator 100 years before he liberated him, King Cyrus, the king of the Persians or the Medians.
The
Um,
Medes.
the Medes, yeah. So liberal textual critics must be challenged to provide evidence that God is not provident, nor omniscient, and omnipotent. Such a challenge would require a universal negation by the critic, which their unbelieving worldview prohibits. The insidious element is many of them claim to be Christians while attempting to destroy what I'll call historic Orthodox Christianity. A worldview critique is needed. They are secretly borrowing from the Christian worldview to attack it. Philosophers refer to this as, have you heard this image, this metaphor, sawing off the limb of the tree that you're sitting on?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you're sitting on a limb and you got your saw out and you're cutting the limb and you're going to fall to your harm, right? And
Yeah.
you did it to yourself. So that's a self-refuting claim. The
Mm-hmm.
Christian worldview is like a flashlight they have in one hand. Remember the borrowed capital? It gives wisdom, it gives knowledge. But then in their other hand, they've got a hammer and they're trying to deny the revelation. Bang
And they're
their
trying to destroy the flashlight.
exactly. That's a Van Til illustration. Their
Mm-hmm.
unbelieving assumptions must be challenged. Miracles are impossible. How much would someone have to know to claim miracles are impossible? Not just unlikely or rare,
They'd have to be
but impossible.
omniscient.
They'd have to be omniscient and know every conceivable scientific fact.
Mm-hmm.
The best way I found in working with them, the claim is simply an honor bias. One useful shortcut is to just go to what Jesus taught about miracle in the Old Testament history. So Jesus affirmed Moses' authorship. He quoted the prophet Isaiah, just one prophet, right? After cleansing the temple. He quoted Isaiah again, his rebuke of the Pharisees. He affirmed creation of Adam and Eve, as well as Noah and the flood, the most controversial section of the Bible for the higher critics, Genesis 1 to 10, right? And Jesus affirms that it's literal. More examples could be cited. So my response to them is, since you've rejected Jesus's authority, I must reject yours. I don't care if you tell me, and this is a catchphrase, they'll say, most biblical scholars. When you hear that, you know that's they're speaking with forked tongue. That's just a false equivalent.
Someone said,
Yeah. someone who was hostile to the Christian worldview,
Yeah.
doesn't like the God of the Bible,
Yeah.
and got a PhD. You know, all I have to do is find somebody with a PhD that affirms it. Remember my response to argumentum ad verecundium? I would just quote, Vern Poythress. I would quote Dr. James Warwick Montgomery, who has 11 degrees and was on the Council for Biblical Inerrancy. So you only have 1 degree, pal. He's got 11. I'm gonna have to reject you. I can play this game. Okay.
Yeah.
The last thing that Greg mentioned, the Bible has excellent credentials as an ancient text. There was a time when the Hittites were
Yep.
considered, you know,
And they find the Hittites.
fictitious. They find their civilization.
Mm.
And in Carchemish by an archaeologist in 1871, I love this last line with the pun that Greg put in there. He said, archaeology has over and over proven to be the enemy of Bible critics, having unearthed their negative prejudice.
Mm.
Unearthed.
And you never, and of course, you never get any retractions from these people. They just move on
Yeah.
to the next area where they haven't yet been uncovered.
Yeah. By the way, I have the book. If you don't, I'm willing to share it. It's a good, useful resource for polemical theology, Bible difficulties. It's from Gleason Archer. And
Oh, I have it.
yeah, that's a really good one because
Yeah,
they're
I
going to
have
bring
it.
up they'll bring up some passage, the number of angels at the
It's the
resurrection.
Encyclopedia of Bible Difficulties.
Yeah, and so I don't memorize that stuff, but I would just because I'm having a worldview debate with them, and if they want to do polemical theology, I'd be prepared to, respond to their challenges. Many, many great Dr. Robert Dick Wilson knew 40 ancient languages. I mean,
Mm.
for crying out loud, Dr. Gleason Archer, Dr. Norman Gleiser did a book on Bible difficulties, and I think he cataloged
Yeah,
over a 10-year period, 6,000 of them provided answers. So
well, these guys
they're
are sharp.
great, good scholarly answers to those things, and you just take them one by one. But I want to go and do the indirect comparison, the worldview. The same applies to Plato. So the last question we're going to cover is how can Plato's work show hypocrisy in biblical textual criticism? So to summarize this, um, Plato flourished in 350 BC, and the earliest fragment we have of his writing is from 900 AD. It was found by
That gives us a 1200-year gap.
So there's a 1,200-year gap, right?
And the New Testament, we can go within 50
50
years.
years.
Yeah.
People object to the New Testament's credentials because of the distance between when it occurred and when it was recorded, right?
Yeah. Well, that's not really why they object. They
No, of
object
course, we
because of
know
the
that.
content.
That's what they tell you. But yet, Plato, you've got
Yeah.
12th century gap, they don't have a problem. They believe
No,
what Plato wrote,
no. For
which
them, it's gospel.
exactly, right?
Yeah.
So that begs the underlying question,
Yeah.
um, why are they why do they vociferously
Yeah.
object if
No,
the
I,
New
I
Testament
never
is
look for
accurate?
fairness in these things with people.
Exactly. So once you know the enmity's there, you know the motivation is
Yeah,
they want to reject Christ's word, for his words will be what judge them on the last day.
exactly.
Unbelievers, last sentence, are avoiding God just like a mouse tries to avoid a cat or a criminal seeks to avoid a police officer. They don't want to find him.
Mm-mm.
Did I have anything else to share? So next week's lesson 10. So I think we're going to be covering, let me take a look here. We'll be doing, this is going to be great. Several questions, but these are all Calvinism and apologetics. Um, yeah, you're going to love this. This is so good. In fact, Calvin, um, there's going to be a section where he will address the liberation of Israelites from Babylon, the Babylonian captivity by
Mhm.
Cyrus, and Calvin uses that as a type of evidence. But Calvin's a strong presuppositionalist. If you have a chance and can read the sections from the institutes that are quoted in there. In fact, if I were just move forward just a little bit with you here, I'll zoom out and we'll just go to the next one. Wait, lesson 10, Calvinism. So maybe I'm wrong. Plato's work.
Starting on 115, right?
We do dialectic tension, lesson 10. Yeah, I mean, determinism, free will. Boy, I jammed a lot in here. maybe I'm wrong here. Is my study not right? Can you rationalism, irrationalism, defects of no, I must be mistaken here. Okay, Calvin begins at 125. Huh. Yeah, I think my study guide is off there. It is. Okay, I'll have to edit that. I'm glad I caught that.
Okay.
Yeah, because I put questions 115 through 132. Man, that's a lot too. It's way too much. But Calvinism begins at question 125. So then what we're going to do next week is we'll do all the way up to 125 from where we left off today. Yeah, we're going to have the square of opposition here. This is kind of cool. We're going to learn dialectical tension. This is good on the temptation of the garden. And yes, a little more on cultural relativism. We're going to answer there. So that'll be fun.
Yeah, that'll be good.
Ryan, thank you for joining, man. Be great if you're at your desk and we can see you and you know you
Yeah,
can because we do a
yeah,
lot of screen sharing. So I'd love you to be able to, it's hard to see it on your phone while you're driving, but so glad you joined us, man. It was good to have your participation.
yeah. No, I'll be on my laptop and stuff ready for next week. So yeah.
Right on. How's the move going? You getting all set?
Yep, getting all settled, getting ready, becoming members tomorrow. So
Oh, congratulations. That's great.
yeah.
Oh yeah, congratulations, Ryan.
Thank you, brother. Yeah. Yeah, this was a very I want to bring